racing? When did you start drag racing, and involved with your father and everything?
I started drag racing probably when I was, the first time probably I did it was probably, I was probably about 17.
You were behind the car drag racing at what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was driving a 68 Camaro. That was fully, I mean, it was a full modified car with roll cage and all. And of course, my dad's been racing since the mid 1950s, so I've been at the drag strips all my life. Grew up around it since I was a baby.
We're going to his events.
Sometimes, yeah, going to his events or just going to the drag races was a family outing. I mean, our whole family would be there, and friends would be there, and you spent basically the entire day at the track watching my father and all his buddies and people racing and trying everybody going for the glory trophy.
So, is that what inspired you to want to get involved in racing, or you just? I mean, what was the experience like when you went?
Yeah, as a child, I was always fascinated with drag racing. I used to love to go and hear the cars and the roar and the burnouts and watching the drag tree when they would come down and hearing the engines wind up to these ungodly RPMs, and then they would drop the clutch and then the cars would go into a wheel stand. And yeah, I mean, as a kid, we thought that was the coolest thing in the world to see.
So did that okay? So you were 17. You saw all that. Then 17, you started drag racing, right?
Right. I mean, I started working, helping my dad with understanding more about engines actually when I was a little younger than that. But as far as, naturally, since you can't drive until you're legally 16, once I got my license, one of the things that my dad told me right off the bat was that before I ever would entertain, he would entertain me driving behind the wheel, I had to learn how to drive a stick. He said, "You're not a driver unless you know how to drive a stick." So needless to say, I got a lot of practice run on an old beat up Toyota that was a 4-speed, and he took me out, and a couple times, I went out by myself with it and learned how to drive a stick. And once I became proficient at it, and he decided, okay, well then, the next stage was to start, start trying to get me some seat time behind the wheel of the race car.
Were you scared?
No, at that time I wasn't really scared, but I really couldn't appreciate though the amount of tremendous horsepower that the cars produce. Because at that time, I mean, let's face it, racing is an adrenaline rush. And as a kid, getting a chance to go flying down a track in a 10-second car that's accelerating from 0 to 100 miles an hour in literally say 5 seconds or whatever it might be, 4 or 5 seconds. It's a rush. And most people don't ever really understand what that feels like, because most cars don't have 800-900 horsepower engines underneath under the hood.
So then after what, 17, 18, well, then you went to school. And you continued to race.
Right. I mean, I raced while I was in college.
Now, what you were studying mechanical engineering, right?
Right.
Is that because of racing, or is that just something
that was one of the things that inspired me to go into engineering, because with me working with my dad with the race motors, there was a lot of questions that I had about why certain things assembled or didn't assemble the way they were supposed to. It was more practical applications. And a lot of times my dad was saying, well, because they didn't either design it right or something didn't. So I started questioning, all right, well, who's designing it? Where's this all coming from? How do we arrive at this point where we got these components and we start building, putting this thing together? So that was one of my inspirations of why I decided to go into the engineering field, because I wanted to learn more about these processes and understand the origin. Where does it start from? How does the idea become a reality? And so that's why I entered the engineering programs that I went to at UC. So.
Now and then you finished. Once you finished that program and all that study, and the mechanical engineering part, right? Then you I mean, you don't have to name the company, but you went to work for a company for almost 10 years.
Well, I worked at
Company A, Company B.
There's 3 primary companies that I worked at.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 of them. And over the course, before I started into my own business, I'd say I probably had close to maybe about 13, 14 years of experience between two of the companies, and of course the other company I worked at while I was in college. Still,
What was your focuses on those three different companies? Were they all the same, or what?
no, well, they were all engineering and manufacturing based companies,
Okay.
and that was, you know, you could call that a blessing in disguise, because I really focused hard to get myself into the right areas of technology that I really could, you know, understand the engineering design principles, understand the manufacturing principles, and learn how to bring them both together to be able to produce a product. Yeah.
So when was the point where you felt, okay, I've got enough of this experience with these three companies and dealing with clients that say, you know what, I'm going to take positive action and go with my ideas because I think I can do what better I can do, or have ideas or that sort of thing, or what?
What was happening was, for one of the companies that I spent the majority of my years with, as time was going, of course, things were changing dynamically within the company, and then of course, I was also entertaining some business opportunities that were coming on the side, in which I wasn't sure if they were going to materialize at all, but all of a sudden they started really materializing, things started getting serious, and but you know, essentially, at some point, I mean, I'd always had dreamed of owning my own company and having products that we would design and develop to be able to offer to the marketplace, you know, primarily in one of those three sectors that I was describing earlier, you know, in the interview. But essentially, what typically happens is that you get put into situations where you're basically supporting and bailing out major corporations out of major binds on projects that are multi-million-dollar projects that, you know, for some reason someone else has either messed up really bad in terms of how it was managed or financially handled or something. So I felt like I was going around kind of cleaning up these messes a lot, and I realized that, you know, one of the things I realized is, wow, if I'm capable of doing these type of things for large companies, imagine what I could do for myself and my own company.
I see.
So essentially, and what I was doing was I was acting almost as if like I was, you know, managing a business, even though I worked for a large company. But essentially, the projects and stuff, I was pretty much on my own to handle how we were going to deal with them, to reconcile whatever the issues were, the problems, and you know, I mean, down even financially as far as, you know, the budgets and everything. So you know, I basically took projects from, as they say, cradle to grave, you know, and as well as solving other people's problems, which you know, sometimes there were some massive issues that were happening, and of course I would be asked to step in, even though sometimes I didn't want to,
Right.
but being asked to step in to do something, and I would go ahead and do it, and you know, by the grace of God, we'd be able to come to a successful end, and everybody's happy, and the customer's happy, they're producing their product, and things get reconciled, and, you know, life moves forward.